Okay, so how are we going to do this problem? Let me write it down here. In fact, I'm going to use x. I don't want to use r's or whatever letters they have. Minus 3x plus 12 equals 4. Okay. Well, I would encourage you to especially, let me go back up here and let me put in the exam notes. That's the best way. There it is. So if you look at the exam one notes, there it is. So this is the exam one notes, which is at the very top of the unit one module. It says how to do the quadratic formula. It gives you the quadratic formula right there. The first step is to get a zero. Notice step one when we do the quadratic formula is to get a zero. So first you have to subtract whatever, 5 or whatever, and get a zero. And then you identify A, B, and C and use the quadratic formula. So use these notes. They'll help you. They're on the Canvas course, the module, unit one module right at the top. Let's do it. So I'm going to do this. So step number one. Get a zero. Get a zero on one side. So to get a zero on one side, I'm going to subtract 12 here from both sides. Cancels that out. And we get, oh, what am I doing? You don't subtract 12. I'm being crazy here. I am losing my brain. Not subtract 12. I got to subtract 4, right? To get a zero, I got to subtract 4. Oops. Okay, there we go. Subtract 4 from both sides. Cancel that. I want to get a 0. 2x squared minus 3x plus 8. Yeah, so first step, get a 0. Oops, what I just bumped there. Get a 0. So we've got a 0 on one side. That's the first step. And then step 2, identify A, B, and C and use the quadratic formula. This is A, 2, B is the negative 3, and C is the 8. And then plug those in to the quadratic formula. What is the quadratic formula? Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So I'm going to plug in now this stuff to the quadratic formula. So we got negative B. So negative 3. Do you see what happened there? We have the negative sign from the formula, and then B itself, notice, is negative 3. So that's going to end up being positive in a minute, isn't it? Negative, negative. Square root of B squared. So watch out for that really common mistake is people forget to get both negatives. So I'll only bring down 1. Minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Okay, so then what becomes over there? 2 negatives is positive 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 64 over 4. So I just multiplied 4 times 2 times 8, got that 64. Okay, and now this is 3 plus or minus, let me see, we subtract that, maybe get minus, is it 65? No, it's 55. What am I doing? Better use my calculator. 9 minus 2, that's 55, right? Let me double check. Yeah, right. Over 4. All right, we good to there so far? So we're solving this equation. Step number 1 is get a 0. So we subtracted 4 from both sides, got a 0. And then we're identifying A, B, and C. So we're using the quadratic formula to solve this. Here's the quadratic formula. Identify A, B, and C, plug them in. We get down to here. Now, what do we do when we have a negative inside of a root?
You include an I, don't you?
Yeah, you kick out an I right to the front, huh? Good job,
Yeah.
good job. That's right. Whenever you have a negative, let me write that over here. Maybe that'll be step 3 or whatever. Step 3, negative inside the root goes out as I. So you take that negative and you put out an I in the front and it's gone. because you can't have square root of a negative number. It's imaginary. You can try it in your calculator, it'll be air, right? You can't take the square root of a negative. Is everybody good with that? Right? Like, the square root of 9 is 3. Why? If a young child asked you, why is the square root of 9 3? You would say, because 3 times 3 is 9. And you're right. That's the reason. Well, therefore, likewise, you can't have the square root of negative 9. It's impossible. It's not real. There's no number times itself that's negative 9. That's impossible. So you can't have a negative in a root. That's why it kicks out an I. It's imaginary. It's not real anymore. That's what we're saying. So you got to remember that whenever there's a negative inside of a root, kick out an I. Okay, so where does that leave us then? So now we're at 3 plus or minus I square root of 55 over 4. Okay, now with the square roots, you got to see if you can simplify them. Turns out the square root of 55 cannot be simplified. I'll just write try to simplify the square root. How so? What do I mean? Well, square root of 55, that's 5. You break it down, 5 times 11, and it doesn't break down anymore, right? You can't break down the 11, and you could just say 1 times 11. That's not smaller. You're using the 11 again, right? So that's as small as it would go. And notice there's no matching pairs to send out. Remember, it's 2 for 1. Square roots are a 2 for 1 deal. If you have 2 of anything, it sends 1 out, doesn't it? But we don't have 2 of anything. So this one is no simplification possible. No simplification possible. So we're done there. So we give the final answer. Here's how we write it. 3 plus I square root 55 over 4, comma, 3 minus. Remember, the plus and minus was 2 options. So we have to write those 2 different options. There it is. There is our final 2 answers. Just like that. And they do want the I answers on this. If you notice up here, it said, give that answer using I, do not say D and E. So on this problem, they want you, one of the earlier problems, we just said D and E, because those aren't real, are they? Those are imaginary answers, which means real answers don't exist, technically. There's 2 imaginary answers, but they wanted us to give those imaginary answers on this problem. So we did. There we go.